and welcome back. This week is week J. So today we are doing a Jaguar wearing a jester hat and a jacket, juggling some juggling balls. The colours I'm using for the Jaguar are titanium white, Titan buff, benzimidazolone yellow, yellow oxide, raw sienna, black, Van Dyke brown hue, and burnt umber light. I'm starting off by base coating all of the fur in a mixture of yellows. Instead of base coating in a flat colour, I'm adding in the dark shades and the lighter highlights, as well as a variation in the colour tones. By adding in all of these variations now in this first layer of fur, it makes it a lot easier once I start doing the dots to really have that dimension behind the dots on the fur. The Jaguar spots are going to be black, so there won't be too much colour variation or lights and shadows in them. So doing this now on the yellowish side of the fur and then adding the dots in later makes the process a lot easier. I've lined the eyes, the muzzle and the jowls in white, which adds to that dimension and really brings those parts forward. I'm using the Van Dyke brown hue, watered down a little bit for some of the shadowed areas and a few of the dirty areas. Van Dyke brown hue is already quite a translucent colour. A little tip, any paints that have the word hue after them are a translucent paint. But I still like to add that touch of water to change the consistency and make it easier to blend out. And with these shadows, you can see the shape of the face really starting to come out. I then go back to my Titan buff and my white and add in some of those highlights and a few of the lighter patches of fur. As a general rule of thumb, lighter colours will appear closer to the viewer and kind of push that part of the painting forward. Darker colours therefore recede back into the painting and make them seem a little further away. Charlie and Coco have again joined us, and you may notice that Charlie's hair is a little shorter this week. They have just got back from the groomers. Charlie had a clip all over. They both had a nice little spa day. And it's summer here in Australia, so it was time to cut Charlie's fur and make him a little bit cooler for the warmer days to come. Back to the painting now. I'm now starting to add in those black Jaguar spots. Instead of going straight in with the black on the spots, I've gone in with Van Dyke brown hue first. I'm going to mark out all of the spots and then go back in and add some black to those spots. I chose to use the Van Dyke brown first as it was an easier way to map out where I wanted everything to go. I didn't want to go in with the black, which is a lot harder to remove if I wasn't happy with the position of the spots. This way, if I did make a mistake, it would be much easier to either rub it out or paint over it again. With all of the Jaguar markings complete, I'm moving on with the same colour to do the details around the nose and the mouth and the eyes. It's about this point in the painting that I'm getting really excited. The image that I had in my head is now coming to life in the painting, and it's actually going exactly how I wanted it to. Now that I'm pretty happy with the nose and the mouth, I'm going back in with some black and darkening up the deepest part of those crevices. I'm relining the eyes to make them that little bit darker and adding in some spots on his chin. Now it's time for the eyes. That black that I've put around the eyes is still wet, so I'm purposely dragging it in with a light yellow colour. I didn't want to use just plain white because it would have made it more grey, and I wanted that warmth behind it. I'm marking out where the pupils are going to go and the iris in the middle. And you'll probably start to notice that I've actually gone over the eyes a few times, changing up the colours and the shading just to get it the way that I wanted it to look. It took a few turns to get it right, but in the end, I was pretty happy with how they turned out. For the nose, I've added in quinacridone magenta and lightened it up with a bit of white. I'm now going in with the shadows, and for that I'm using the Van Dyke brown hue with a touch of black, and then mixed in a bit of the Titan buff to lighten it all up and watered it down with a bit of water. I apply this to the areas that I need, and if it's a little bit harsh, I use a soft dry brush to blend it out. With all those shadows now done, I'm going in with the final highlights, and for this I'm just using a plain white. I've done a few little first strokes on the chin just to dull down those black spots, but you may have noticed I haven't done any fur details at all on this one. Sometimes it's far better to not add every tiny little detail and just give the impression of something. That is something that I have struggled with so much. I feel like if I'm painting fur, I have to add every little fur stroke. But more often than not, if you do add every little fur stroke, especially when your subject is about this distance from the camera, you're not going to see every fur stroke, even from real life. If you were to stand in front of a Jaguar, not that you would, but if you were to stand in front of a Jaguar at this kind of distance, you wouldn't see every little fur stroke. You would just see the colours and the shadows. So that's something I'm really trying to work on. And now I'm moving on to the jacket, which for this one I have added to my palette Phthalo Blue and Ultramarine Blue. And I still have all of the colours from before, so I will be using the Van Dyke brown hue and the black for some shadows, and adding in a bit of Titan buff and a bit of titanium white for the highlights. I decided to map out all of those creases and the darkest areas first. I'm not quite doing an underpainting in this one or a glaze over the top. I just found it easier with all of those folds to add the dark bits first. It kind of gave me a little bit of a map as to where I needed to put the next layer of colour. For those that have been following me for a while have probably realised that my painting techniques tend to differ from painting to painting. Sometimes I do a flat solid colour first and then I add details. Other times I do the underpainting and the glazing, and sometimes I go in doing it this way. I don't really have a rhyme or a reason as to why I do what technique when I do it. Most of the time it's just what I kind of feel at the time. I've never really been good at sticking to one particular style or one particular technique. I find I change them up, and it's a little bit to do with learning new techniques and advancing or improving in my work, I can say, but I do tend to still go back to other techniques that I've used in the past as well. So I think it's just more what I'm feeling at the time. I'd like to just paint and do what I feel. I think it makes it more enjoyable rather than having to be confined to a box to do things exactly the same all the time. I used to struggle a lot with, Sometimes I like to do watercolor. Sometimes I like to do acrylic. Sometimes I like to play with clay. And I think the pressure of having to find your particular style can be really, really hard. Like, I do feel like I have a sense of style. I do like this surrealism juxtaposition type theme. But I find it is just that. It's a theme. It's not so much a style. I will style hop, as Mirabila likes to say, between different techniques. And I kind of like that. It gives you a bit more creative freedom to just paint how you feel. Let me know down in the comments if you feel like this too. Do you have a particular style that you just stick with and that's the way that you paint all the time because that's how you know? Or do you kind of style hop too? Or do you change up your techniques or your mediums? I'd love to hear what you guys do down in the comments. For our Jaguar's Jester hat, I have used the colours cadmium orange and red violet. For the shadowed areas, I've added a little bit of blue. I didn't want it just to be darkened up by black, so I added a bit of blue in it to kind of give it a bit more of a muted shadow. I didn't want any deep dark shadows. And for the highlighted areas, I have just used the titanium white to lighten up those original colours. In my original sketch, I was going to do the juggling balls just a plain colour. I was thinking of doing one red, one purple, one green, one yellow, that kind of thing. But as I was painting, I remembered these juggling balls that my son used to have. And I think we got them from Kmart. And they had this crisscross pattern on it. So there was like 4 panels of colours. There was green, yellow, red and blue. So from memory, I decided to paint these juggling balls like the ones that my son used to have. The colours I used for the juggling balls are pine green, phthalo blue, pyrrole red and benzimidazolone yellow medium. What you're seeing me paint here is the first coat. I ended up doing 2 coats on each colour and I ended up adding a touch of white to the phthalo blue and to the pine green because I felt like the phthalo blue was getting a little bit lost against the jacket. It doesn't look like it too much here, but by the time I put the second coat on, it darkened up quite a bit and I wanted it to stand out from the jacket and not kind of get lost. And the same went for the pine green. By the time I'd done the second coat, the colour was really dark and it was getting a little bit lost and it wasn't coming forward in the painting. And remember I said earlier, things that are lighter do tend to look closer to the viewer. So I added a little bit of white to each of those colours to brighten them up. For the shadows, I'm just using Van Dyke Brown Hue with a little bit of water and then fluffing out the edges with a dry brush. I started off the shadows by doing the shadow on the entire juggling ball first on that right hand side, and then because the juggling balls that I remember were made up of 4 panels of material, I wanted to add a little bit of a shadow line in the creases of where those material pieces would have been sewn together. I think it helps add to that 3D effect without going too far into detail. Once all of those shadows have been done on all of the juggling balls, I've added in a watered down white and then used a dry brush to fluff it all out. I've then used this same white mix to add in a few final details or a few final highlights to the jacket. I'm now using a watered down titanium white to do the whiskers on our Jaguar. And can you believe it? I nearly forgot the letter again. I was going on such a good winning streak with remembering it halfway through the painting with every painting for the last 3 or 4 weeks. But today I actually thought I was finished and had to come back and add it. So here is our letter J.
And he's done. Our Jaguar wearing a jester hat, a jacket, and juggling some juggling balls is all finished. And that's it for week J. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget that notification bell. It really does help my channel out, and that way you will get notified for all the other letters of the alphabet superset that I'll be doing.